there's a bit of an elitism, judgmental. I'm totally judgmental here, but it's like there's a little bit of this like integral elitism of like we're in our high castle in a very privileged position as well of like we can see more than everyone else can see, so we don't have to deal with some of the other stuff that people who can't see this stuff have to. I don't know. I'm rambling and I'm jumbling my words here, but like I imagine there's like these people in this high castle who see they can see more of the map.
Mm-hmm.
You know, partly because they're in the high castle. They
Yeah, they
can
got
see
a
more of
better
the
vantage
layout. They
point.
can see more of what's going on, and there's kind of like an arrogance and a sense of like we know what's best. We know what's best for you.
What
We
if,
and we see where it's come, and so we think we know where it's going
okay.
beyond this.
So what if it's not we know what's best, it's just we know what's next?
Well, I don't know that we do, or they do.
What if game B is the not grasping part, the not trying to control? What if it's actually a certain degree of surrender?
I mean,
More
I dig that.
more
I'm into that. I'm not
capital
against
S
game B.
stoicism, right? More capital S stoicism, the idea of living in accordance with nature rather than trying to work against it or
I
control it.
mean, I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be in my own high castle, just like this is what I'll condone. This is what I'll approve. This is, I'm not against game B, but I am cautious of those individuals or those parts of maybe all of us who think that we know what's best, and also there's a part there's, so I'm concerned about thinking we know what's best. I'm also concerned with thinking we have more control and influence than we actually have. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
a certain amount of, I think, like the system is so fucking large. The system, the
Mm-hmm.
the interacting multitude of systems is so fucking large, consisting of 7 or 8 billion, how many billion people there are on the planet, and
Mm-hmm.
all these different governments. There's now we have like AI in the mix. There's all these different interacting systems. There's
Mm-hmm.
all these non-human create like natural systems. A lot of fucking things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, reminded me of something really cool that I'm going to share on Facebook, which has nothing to do with this, nothing to do with any of this,
Okay.
but just bookmark that. It has to do with the moon.
Something really cool. All right.
I thought was really cool, but I'm a
Okay.
nerd,
Okay, go on.
and it has nothing to do with this. But it's like I've become really fucking humble, maybe too humble, probably too humble. But over the last couple of years, and I've had my own sort of personal regressions or places
Mm-hmm.
where I've been getting really stuck or places where I've been really isolating
Mm-hmm.
myself. But it's like there's a certain degree to which I realize how little control I have and how much, if I want to maintain any sort of sanity in my life, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to like let go and allow and watch the chaos and tell myself the story that the chaos is super intelligent.
Well, it's a self-organizing system.
Yeah, yeah. And that for instance, all this increase in polarization we're experiencing this past year, especially around vaccination, but all sorts of other stuff, it's
Mm-hmm.
like on there's a part of me that's like society is crumbling and we're fucked. And it's just like, you know, people adding insult to injury with the polarization. It's just like it's increasing the polarization. There's a part of me I just have to tell myself a story and look for evidence.
Mm-hmm.
This is my own pseudoscientific uh, confirmation bias, but looking for evidence that confirms my story of the polarization is good. I mean, it's bad and it's terrible, but it's also like, look how many people driving to think about this problem more deeply. Look how many more people are offering programs around polarization. Look how many people are driven to like, I can't tolerate this anymore. I am done tolerating. I need to learn new ways to deal with it. I need to start learning how to have these conversations. Like that is a
Okay.
developmental. It's a developmental crisis.
Sure.
Like individuals have their development, like Keegan talks about, the individual has his or her or their developmental crisis at a certain stage where their current mode of thinking no longer is able to deal with it. And I think as
Mhm.
a society, the crises that we're facing in the world are creating polarization. The polarization is creating more crisis, but it's creating that developmental crisis that, again, this narrative I have to tell myself is like, ultimately the system reorganizes and self-organizes and emerges and bifurcates into something ultimately better.
Well, that's the problem.
Messy, but better.
But that's the one problem with that, right? Because I guess there's a few things here. One, I'm hearing you talk about something about, perceiving the good, or at least the necessity of what is happening to get us to somewhere else better.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with that. And I think integral theory would agree with that as well. So when I hold that, then I just look at what we were talking about earlier, is this question about whether or not you're resisting what is, or whether or not you're going to just allow it and stay out of the way. However,
Mm-hmm.
what that also, the polarization that you're saying that, might have its use and everything else, it's like, but those are the actions of individual people either resisting the way. So it's like, yes, you as an individual person amongst 7 billion in one particular nation in the world, you have very little individual impact.
Mm-hmm.
However, if everybody didn't do anything, nothing would ever change. So you also have to realize that, your actions in the world actually contribute to the complexity and to the change
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
So full blown, and not that I think you're advocating for apathy, but for anybody who
Definitely
is,
not.
full
Definitely
blown
not.
apathy doesn't get anything fucking done, unless, of course, you perceive that you are so toxic and in a position of power such that you could sway things in a really terrible direction. And again, that trust that the response to it, the chaos that that person creates, will have a particular response. Where I maybe take issue with the last thing that you said is that it occurs to me that we can, whatever the next thing is, I don't think we're guaranteed that it is better. I think we can move based on an addiction, we can move forward based on an allergy, or we can move forward based on the idea of it being clean or equanimous or something like that. And we might not actually know until we have hindsight to look back on it and see whether or not that served us or not, and I guess that's based on weighing the pros and cons. How many people died? Or,
God,
like,
dude.
how many
Yeah, well, I mean, like,
atrocities took
we,
place?
part of the, I think part of what's needed, what I think is needed, is more complex thinking. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we both of us can get into the habit and the trap of black or white thinking. Like,
Sure.
it's either better or it's worse, it's
Mm-hmm.
working or it's not.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Um, you're either apathetic or you're full on trying to change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Burn it
it's
down.
it's not even necessarily like that there's like a middle ground, like a compromise between the two,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or a linear spectrum. I like to think about it more in parts, like there are parts that work and parts that don't, parts that will be better, parts that won't. I don't mean parts of self. I just mean, you know, certain ways in which I need to let go of control, and there's certain ways in which I can enact more agency and enact more trying to have an impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also recognizing that with complex emergent living systems,
Mm-hmm.
it seems that there's a non-linearity in terms of action and effect. So it is very possible that our very small actions can ripple out into very large effects,
Mm-hmm.
or that we're participating in a small cultural movement that is the game, under the game B umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
that has its sort of tendrils out and will eventually shift the tide or something and it's better than it's happening than it's not, I think. Where am I going with this? I don't know where I'm going with this. I lost my track of thought, but I am trying to find a way forward where I'm doing what I can and I'm trying to have an impact. And for me, that is helping people develop, helping people change how they relate with themselves, helping people change how they relate with one another, helping people get out of their own way, clear the junk, develop skills, develop capacities, become better leaders, so to speak, such that each person is a node in the system, and each of these nodes, and if it's a computer network, each of these computers gets upgraded with better software and can have more of a positive influence on their own networks surrounding them.
Oh, I mean, I like that analogy, that idea of pieces of software, because there's software that has bugs that makes the software not work. And then there's software that could be bug free, but it's not particularly, and I'm not trying to draw one or another, or black or white, or a dualism, but then you have software that it can be absent of bugs, but it's also limited in features as well, right? So this is something I like about that, like almost you can have like really ambitious software that just introduces all these bugs, or you can just fix all the bugs, which could be some form of healing, such that you then have a piece of software, but it's limited in scope, because to add more things to it, you run the risk of creating more bugs. There's just something about the analogy.
Yeah. I mean, well, you can't avoid, I mean, in linear controlled computer systems, you can, I imagine, if you try really hard, you can avoid all the bugs, maybe. If external conditions don't change, and everything,
it's possible. Stable, it's possible, yes.
If it weren't nested inside of a complex living system, then maybe.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think that's part of it. It's like we have to accept that there are going to be some bugs, and that some of those bugs are going to make things more difficult. Some of those bugs are going to have, some of them are going to be positive bugs that we didn't expect.
A feature.
Yeah, well, I mean, unintended features.
What's that?
Unintended features. The
that's
feature that you didn't think was going to be a feature.
Well, it's a saying in the software development world. That's not a bug; it's a feature.
Oh, I see.
Somebody reports it as a bug, and it's like, no, that's a feature. It's supposed to do that. Yes, it would generally, it's an unintended feature.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look what we can do with this bug. But but I think what I imagine, I don't know that it's what you mean, but what I imagine is possible around the idea that there are good bugs. It means that there is a bug that allows us to go back and look at it and realize a fundamental flaw in our logic, such that we redevelop it so that bug, we end up with better code at the end of it, because we went back and looked at it and saw like, oh, this is in the way. We could actually do this better, and we redo it, and it ends up better.
Well, that's one way. I think there are multiple ways in which the bug can be net benefit. Maybe it helps us, improve the code. Maybe it creates a problem that leads to something better. Maybe like,
that's kind of the first
like someone, like in a human sense, someone experiences a huge disappointment or frustration or something, and it leads them to do some introspection, or it leads them to make different choices.
Yeah,
the suffering creates a new emergent positive thing. Or the third thing is that there's like a quote unquote error in the software, but it actually creates an unforeseen benefit in how the software works that you weren't anticipating, that the users discover, and they're like, wow, this is fantastic. I'm so glad you developed this. And you're like, yeah, I planned that.
Yeah, I mean,
and again, I'm not a software developer. So.
We're stretching this analogy a bit, because now we need to get into what is, what's technically a bug. A bug is not somebody's expectation of how the software should work, and the software works differently than how they think it is. Bugs, an error in logicality. We intended the software to do this. The user expects it to do this. It does not do that, and therefore we have an error somewhere in the flow of the execution, and we have to turn around and correct so that it results in the outcome that we planned for it to. Anything else would be called like a limitation. So even if the software can't do that, it's like, well, it's a limitation of it because we never wrote software for it to do it.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
some
so the
people might
metaphor is
call that a
breaking down,
bug.
but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there are, I mean, there are examples, I just can't think of any at the moment, but of a piece of software gets used in an unintended way.
That can happen, yeah.
Like the user
Repurposed.
discovers something about the software that wasn't in the original plan that ends up being advantageous in a way that wasn't foreseen.
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
emerging.
if you put a secure